Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. Today we're going to keep talking about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a al-Maqdisi and the Tafweedh. I think you may have seen a previous video about the issue. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you watch it. Just to quickly reiterate the video, we look at Ibn Qudama's book of Usool al-Fiqh called Rawdhat a-Naadhir, where he talks about the muhkam and the mutashabih, the clear and the unclear words. And he quoted al-Qadi saying that the muhkam is the mufassir or the explained, and the mutashabih is the mujmal or the abstract. He then went on to explain how verse 7 of Surah Ali Imran explains this issue, and this is the basis in the Quran. And he mentioned how what's mentioned in that ayah, وَرَاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ, or the rasikhuna, or knowledgeable people of knowledge say, we believe in them, is a type of tafweed, and he says this in Rawdhat a-Naadhir. That's just a quick summary. I recommend you see the full video if you want to know more. Now, while I firmly believe that the words of Ibn Qudama are enough to exonerate himself from the claims that he was what they call muthbit, or basically someone following the way of Taqi a-Deen ibn Taymiyya, who believed that the Arabic language can give us the meanings of some of these mutashabih words. We see people that they still bring this claim forward, and therefore I want to have a second video to further exonerate him. I mean, it's one thing that people maybe they just mention Ibn Qudama was musbit, he wasn't mufawwadh. But it's another thing when you see that his words are used in books, and unfortunately, as we're going to see today, they're taken out of context. Now recently, I had quoted one of our sheikhs, Sheikh Faris al-Khazraji, from something that he said in one of his lessons of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama's Lu'mat al-I'tiqad, where he said, just bring the evidence that any of the Sahaba said that we understand these sifat of Allah according to the Arabic language. And if not, isn't their silence on them sufficient for us, meaning that we shouldn't need to do more? Now, one brother, he thought that this comment was from the shubahat of the Jahmiyyah. This is what he said. And I said, if you think I'm a Jahmi, then please contact me. And I would hope that someone, at least for the sake of Allah and his love for his Muslim brother, if he thought someone was really a Jahmi, that he would try to talk to that person and guide him. But instead, he had a bit of a nasty reply. You seem to have a problem with the basic English comprehension skills. My direct messages aren't going to help. Then he went on to say, if you are unaware of the interpretations of the Sahaba for the sifat, that's also a sign of your utter lack of knowledge on an issue you speak about so confidently. And personally, I find this kind of response just distressing, because once again, if you really believe that someone is misguided, then you should try to guide them. And if it's someone that it's more than a lay person, which I mean, inshallah, I think I have at least more knowledge than a lay person, then that's someone worth talking to, because I understand if they're uneducated people, maybe they're just repeating something they heard. And the same idea that I'm unaware of the interpretations of the Sahaba on the sifat, I mean, that's also a bit of a ridiculous statement. I think if you look at my posts, I mean, I'm not someone who's completely unfamiliar with these issues. At least, to be fair, one should say you have the wrong interpretation of them. But I think that when people don't have good arguments, they switch to attacks. And just to emphasize that I made the original statement, that person then wrote in Arabic basically that the foundation of speaking in Arabic is understanding, meaning what's said should be understood. And I mean, we know this is the way of Taqi ibn Taymiyya, believing that everything can be understood from the Arabic language. And he said, bring an evidence from the athar, not an evidence from kalam. And he claimed that that was the way of the Sahaba, and that they explained the nusus sifat, or the text from Quran and Sunnah of the sifat. And when I pushed for an evidence, I was told, look at this book, Maqaalat a-Tafweedh by Sheikh Qudama'a Dhamm. He said is a very well referenced and excellent resource. So I tried to be someone of an open mind. Maybe I have a different opinion than someone else, but I want to understand what they think. So I started to read the book, and just to give you, a quick idea about this author. The author is a Sheikh, Dr. Mohammed bin Mahmoud al-Khudair. He has memorized the Book of Allah, mashallah. He has studied many of the hadith books, including the 6 and some of the masanid. He has studied the Hanbali fiqh books and several aqeeda books. The Sheikh seems to have a master's degree in comparative fiqh from the University of Durman al-Islamiyya in Sudan. And he has a PhD in fiqh al-Mu'amalat from the Jamiat al-Madina al-Alamiyya in Malaysia. So once again, the book is called Maqaalat a-Tafweedh بين السلف والمتكلمين, and this is available online on PDF. I'm looking at the version by the Taqi publisher from London, England. Anyways, I started to read the book. I did, inshallah, have a sincere intention to really understand this point of view and try to find this evidence that the Sheikh told me was in this book, the evidence that the Sahaba had made reference that we can derive the meaning of the sifat from the Arabic language. He didn't tell me where to look, but he told me to read this book. So I started to read the book. Now the problem is that in one important part of the book, the author, he started to mention something about Shaykh al-Islam ibn Qudama'a. So we're going to start looking at page 54 of the book, and this is in a section called Madhab Selef fi Sifat. So the Madhab of the Selef in the Sifat, and we're at the first part of that section called al-Murad bil-dhaahir, or what is intended or meant by al-dhaahir, meaning the word dhaahir. And the author goes on to say, بين أهل العلم المراد بالظاهر ما يسبق إلى الفهم لأهل اللسان، وأن هذا الظهور قد يكون بمجرد الوضع أو وقد يكون بسياق الكلام. So the people of knowledge have described that the intended meaning of dhaahir is what we can say like guides one to understanding for the people of that language, and that these apparent meanings can be from like the word itself or from the context of the language. And as a general meaning, this isn't objectionable, but the problem is that we are talking about sifat, and eventually we'll get to that point. He then goes on to say, this is toward the bottom of page 54, and now he's talking about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a al-Maqdisi rahimahullah, مبنيا أن الظاهر ما يتبادر إلى الأفهام. So he says about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama that he builds on this idea of al-Dhahir, or the apparent meaning, as what makes you think of what's understood. Now if we continue on to the top of page 55, he's now quoting Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama from his book Dhamm a-Tafweedh. Okay, so he quotes this sentence from Shaykh al-Islam. He says, وَالظَّاهِرْ اللَّفْظ هُوَ مَا يَسْبَقْ إِلَى الْفَهْمِ مِنْهُ حَقِيقَةً كَانَ أَوْ مَجَازًا. And this means the apparent of the word or wording is what leads one to understanding about it, whether it's a literal or metaphorical understanding. Then the author goes on to quote Shaykh al-Islam Taqi ibn Taymiyya rahimahullah, someone that we love, though we have some disagreements with. And he says, فَإِنْ ظَاهِرَ الْكَلَامِ هُوَ مَا يَسْبَقْ إِلَى الْعَقْلِ السَّلِيمِ مِنْهُ لمن يفهم بتلك اللغة ثم قد يكون ظهوره بمجرد الوضع وقد يكون بالسياق الكلام. Now this is almost exactly what Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama said, but Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, he's added this extra phrase about what guides the sound mind. So he's specifying here about having also the sound mind to understand this. Now just to reiterate, the claim here is that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama gave this principle that from the apparent wording of a word, we can derive a meaning from that. And meaning will refer to sifat, because the book is arguing against a-Tafweedh. Now, like I said, I don't deny that this is in the book Dhamm a-Tafweedh, and we're going to get to that. But I think it's very important that first we look at some different sections of the book that will establish Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama's position on the sifat, and then we're going to look at this particular statement and the context of where that statement is. So we're not going to go outside of the book Dhamm a-Tafweedh. Everything I'm mentioning is from this book, and I'm trying to sincerely give the opinion of the author through referencing the book. So I'm not kind of cherry picking different statements here and there. You can see the book. I'm reading from the Dar al-Maktabis printing. This is the first edition, printed in 1443 Hijri, which corresponds to 2022 of the current era. I will give the page numbers of the things that I'm mentioning, and you will also see it on the screen, inshallah. Now, the first thing we want to look at is at the beginning of the third section, page 33. Here, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama, rahimahullah, he is mentioning the ayah that we previously mentioned, ayah number 7 of Surah Ali Imran, and there he affirms that there are mutashabih, and he says, وَلَا يَعْلَمْ تَأْوِيلَهُ غَيْرُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. So nobody knows the interpretation or the meaning of the mutashabih other than Allah Ta'ala. This is nothing new. This is the same as what he's mentioned in Rawdhat a-Naadhir. You can see the longer discussion in the other video. Now this is the critical point, because as we said, Shaykh Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, he doesn't have this idea. So Ibn Qudama is affirming the mutashabih. Then on page 38, he says, أن اللفظة إذا احتملت معاني فحملها على أحدهما من غير تعيين احتمال أن يحمل على غير مراد الله تعالى. So here he's affirming that a mutashabih word can have multiple meanings. So he said that if a word has multiple possible meanings, and then if you give it one meaning that's not specified that it could be the possible meaning, then you could be going against the intention of Allah Ta'ala. Then he goes on, this is the top of page 40, فَإِنَّ صِفَاتَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى لَا يَثْبَتُ وَلَا يُنْفَى إِلَّا بِالتَّوْقِيفِ. So this is a very interesting statement. He's saying that we can't establish or negate the sifat of Allah except by stopping. So once again, stopping, not affirming a meaning or literal meaning, but by stopping. And then he goes on to say, وَوَجِبَ الْإِيمَانُ بِهَا بِمَعْنَى الَّذِي أَرَادَهُ الْمُتَكَلِّمْ بِهَا. So it's obligatory to believe in them with the meaning that was intended by the one who spoke them. So he's saying the word al-iman. If something has a literal meaning, like let's say door, maybe it has possible figurative meanings, but let's just say in the context, it's clear that the meaning is the physical door, like door of the house, etc. Then there's nothing to believe in. Anything that is muhkam, you don't believe in it, because by definition, the muhkam is the mufassir, the explained. There's nothing to believe in a thing that's explained and understood. And on the same idea, he goes on to say, وَهَذِهِ طَرِيقَةً مُسْتَقِيمَةً وَمَقَالَةً صَحِيحَةً سَلِيمَةً لَيْسَ عَلَى صَاحِبِهَا خطرا ولا يلحقه عيب ولا ضرر لأن الموجود منه هو الإيمان بلفظ الكتاب والسنة. So this is the straight path, the correct and safe statement. There's no danger on the one who says it, nor does any deficiency or harm follow him, because what it is believing, al-iman, bil-lafz al-kitab wa sunnah, believing in the wording or word of the kitab and sunnah. Now the next piece of evidence, we're going to see that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a rahimahullah, he affirms the existence of the sifat. He does not affirm a meaning or a meaning that's based in the Arabic language. So first, we'll look at page 15, where he says, الأصل في هذا أن الكلام في صفات فرع عن الكلام في الذات إنما هو إثبات وجود لا إثبات تحديد ولا تكييف. So the principle is that discussion of the sifat is a branch of discussion of the dhat or the essence of Allah. And what it is establishing its existence, إثبات وجود, establishing its existence, not establishing a definition or form. And he mentions the same thing in several places in the book with slightly different wording, but this is even more interesting. On page 23, where he's explaining what Imam Malik radiallahu anhu said about al-istawa, and inshallah we'll do a video on that one because it's also a great tafsir. He says on the explanation of al-istawa ghayru majhul, or the istawa is not unknown. He says ay ghayru majhul al-wujud, so not unknowing that it exists. He's not saying about a meaning in the Arabic language, once again, that it exists, al-istawa exists, and khalas, he stops there. Then Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a rahimahullah, he brings another important point, that we can't know Allah and the sifat by the aql, by rational understanding. So he says, أن صفات الله تعالى وأسماؤه لا يدركه بالعقل لأن العقل إنما يعلم صفة ما رآه أو رأى نذيره والله لا يدرك بالأبصار ولا نذير له ولا شبيه فلا تعلم صفاته وأسماؤه إلا بالتوقيف. And this means the sifat of Allah Ta'ala and His names are not known by the aql, by intellect, because the aql or intellect, it knows an attribute, a sifa, from what it sees, or it sees something that's like it. And Allah is not known by seeing. He has no thing similar to Him, nothing that's resembling Him. So His sifat, His attributes and His names are not known except by tawqif, by stopping. Once again, stopping, not referring to the linguistic meaning in the Arabic language, by stopping, and we explained the stopping before. And the last piece of evidence is that Ibn Qudama affirms Tafweedh, and this is what I find just absolutely amazing. I don't know why. I'm even speechless to try to explain it, but I'm absolutely taken away that in multiple books Ibn Qudama is mentioning Tafweedh, and people still make the claim that he's not mufawwadh. So here, when he's explaining that part of Surah Ali Imran, verse 7, آمنا به كل من عند ربنا, we all know the verse. He says, كلام يشعر بالتفويض وتسليم لما لم يعلموه. So this speech, it brings about the sense of tafweed and taslim, submission. So consigning the knowledge to Allah and submission for what they don't know. And he says tafweed. You see it on the screen. I'm not making this up. This is tafweed. What is tafweed? Do we now not agree what tafweed is? Or are they still hanging with this idea it's only a tafweed of the kayfiyah or something like this? Subhanallah. So I've read the book, I've read other books. I'm not cherry picking, I'm highlighting things, but the meanings that I'm giving, I believe are in context. As I understand them, they're in context. So just in summary, what is Ibn Qudama, Shaykh al-Islam, rahimahullah, what's his position? He said the sifat, mutashabih, whose meaning are unknown, not just unknown, they can't be known. We only affirm their existence and consign their meaning to Allah. This is all what we've read. Alhamdulillah. Now if we go back to what this author, Sheikh al-Khudair, has said in his book, Maqaalat a-Tafweedh, he mentioned that a quote from Ibn Qudama, which still we're going to get to that final quote, but الظاهر اللفظ هو ما يسبق إلى الفهم منه حقيقة كان أو مجازا. So the dhaahir of the word or wording is what leads one to understanding, whether it's a literal or metaphorical understanding. But we have to remember, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama is not discussing sifat. He made it clear. There is muhkam and mutashabih. What he's discussing here applies to the muhkam words. The words that by definition don't need meaning. He's not discussing sifat and mutashabih here. This is number one. What's even more damning is if we go back to what the author added about Shaykh al-Islam Taqi ibn Taymiyya rahimahullah. What's his statement? فإن ظاهر الكلام هو ما يسبق إلى العقل السليم منه لمن يفهم بتلك اللغة. So he's saying the same thing that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama said, but he added this idea that it's understood by the rational mind. And if you remember what we just read previously about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama, he was saying that the sifat can't be known by al-aql, by the intellect, because Allah can't be known by the intellect. So this is also a refutation. I mean, he's mixing two things here. In the same book that he's quoting from, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama has refuted this idea of Taqi Ibn Taymiyya, at least as far as it applies to the sifat. Once again, this is the important point. Ibn Qudama, rahimahullah, he believes in al-muhkam, al-mutashabih, and if you forget this point, then everything is muhkam. He doesn't believe that. Likewise, the mutashabih, and he specifically mentioned the sifat, the attributes and the names of Allah, can't be known by al-aql. Now, if we go to that statement about the dhaahir, or what is the apparent, or for these modern Salafi people, the literal meaning of the word or wording is what directs one to understanding of it, whether hakikatan, literally or metaphorically. Let's see the context of this statement, because it's being presented as just a general principle. But if we see how he's using it here, it's very interesting. So let's read this part of the book. It's very interesting. I mean, it's also beneficial, but it will refute the way that this Sheikh al-Khudair is using this statement. So he says, فإن قيل وقد تأولت آيات وأخبار فقلتم في قوله تعالى وهو معكم أينما كنتم أي بالعلم نحو هذا من الآيات والأخبار فليلزمكم ما لزمنا. Meaning, so if it's said that you have made a ta'wil of some of the verses and reports when you said in his statement ta'ala وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, literally meaning he is with you wherever you are. This is the literal meaning. Meaning by his knowledge. So this means it's not the physical being there with you, but with his knowledge. When we had and the like of this from the verses and the reports. So what you are required to do, we are required to do. They're saying you're making a ta'wil. The word is ma'kum, that means literally with you, but you're saying it means not as a literal being with you, but with knowledge. So now Shaykh al-Islam, he's replying, he says, قلنا نحن لم نتأول شيئا وحمل هذه اللفظات على هذه المعاني ليس بالتأويل. So we didn't make any ta'wil. We have conveyed these words according to their meaning, and that's not a ta'wil. لأن التأويل صرف اللفظ عن ظاهره وهذه المعاني هي الظاهر من هذه الألفاظ بدليل أنه المتبادر إلى الأفهام منها. So he's saying ta'wil is changing the word from its apparent to a meaning, that is the meaning, or that meaning is the apparent of these words, with an evidence that it's bringing about an understanding to it. And then he says the statement that we're all focusing on a lot here, وَظَهْرُ اللَّفْظِ هُوَ مَا يَسْبَقُ إِلَى فَهْمِ مِنْهُ حَقِيقَةً كَانَ أَوْ مَجَازًا. And just to remind you here, we're not talking about sifat. We're talking about the word ma'kum. So we're talking about the claim that we're giving this word an interpreted meaning. Now we're getting into an even more interesting part of his reply. He says, وَلِذَلِكَ كَانَ ظَهْرَ الْأَسْمَاءِ الْعُرْفِيَّةِ الْمَجَازَ دُونَ الْحَقِيقَةِ. So he's saying, and accordingly, the apparent meaning of some of these words that are customarily used is metaphorical and not literal. And he goes on, وَصُرْفَهَا إِلَى الْحَقِيقَةِ يَكُونْ تَأْوِيلًا يَحْتَاجْ إِلَى الدَّلِيلِ. So making it or changing it to a literal meaning is a ta'wil, and it requires evidence. So this is the completely ironic thing. He's using the statement that this author, Sheikh al-Khudair, is using to say that we just take the apparent meaning of a word to get the literal meaning of something, or metaphorical meaning. But the point is that he's saying that we can derive this meaning from the word itself. But here he's saying that even giving a word the literal meaning sometimes is a ta'wil. And then he concludes, وَكَذَلِكَ الْأَلْفَاظُ الَّتِي لَهَا عُرْفٌ شَرِيعٌ وَحَقِيقَةٌ لُغَوِيَّةٌ كَالْوُضُوء وَالطَّهَارَةُ وَالصَّلَاةُ وَالصَّوْمُ وَالزَّكَاةُ وَالْحَجِّ إِنَّمَا ظَاهِرُهَا الْعُرْفُ الشَّرِيعُ دُونَ الْحَقِيقَةِ اللُّغَوِيَّةِ. So likewise, those words that they have a customary Sharia meaning as well as an actual literal linguistic meaning, such as wudu. So wudu can mean water, and it can mean the actual act of lifting state of lesser impurity, for example. Tahara, it has the general meaning of purification, and it can include all the acts of purification in the religion, such as the wudu, ghusl, lifting najasa. As-salah, salah has the linguistic meaning of dua, supplication, but it means specific acts and words uttered with an intention, for example. Sawm, we even know from in the Quran, Surah Maryam, Sawm can refer to not speaking. It has different meanings, but in Sharia it refers to refraining from putting certain things in your body cavity between the sunrise and sunset, for example. Az-zakah, general meaning of purity, but it has a specific meaning of types of obligatory charity, etc. So it says that these are all apparent meanings that are according to a customary Sharia meaning and not a literal linguistic meaning. So when the author quotes these kind of things, he's completely ignoring everything else that's said in this book. He's ignoring that there is something called mutashabih and muhkam. He is ignoring that Ibn Qudamah himself says that we affirm the existence of sifat, not meanings, including meanings derived from the Arabic language. He affirms that we can't know the sifat by al-aql. And he says we do tafweedh. These are all things that we read in Dhamm at-Ta'wil. I have tried my best not to take anything out of context or exaggerate. You can read yourself. I've given you the page numbers in the edition we're looking at. So then on top of all of that, he gives this statement of Ibn Qudamah that, as we said, it's not applying to the mutashabih, and he's bringing this statement to reply to this certain scenario where people are saying that by using a metaphorical meaning that you are doing a ta'wil. I'm very sorry. I find this very disingenuous. I read the qualifications of the person who wrote this book. It's not a lay person. This is a person who has much more knowledge as far as amount, quantity than me. I'm sure. I mean, I read the CV. I'm sure this person, the Sheikh, he has much more knowledge than me. So, I mean, accordingly, I can't blame what he's done as just a blunder or misunderstanding. I'm sure he didn't just by chance open them a ta'wil to that page. So that statement by itself without reading anything else. Because number one, he's a PhD doctor. That's not how a PhD will get information. And as I said, he's someone who I'm sure knows even much more than me. I'm sure he's read this book and many other books. He must know everything that's in the book. To bring that statement out of the context of where it is in the book and out of the context of the whole book and the corpus of the work of that author, I'm sorry, that's very disingenuous. And I feel very sorry for people who look at this person, they say, oh, this is a man with a big beard and he's wearing this shawl. You know, they're respecting his opinion so much. They see his PhD and they're just following. Some of them I know are following blindly. Others I'm even more sorry for because I know they have knowledge or they have the capacity to obtain more knowledge. So, I mean, regardless of our positions in aqeeda, we should reject quoting people out of context. I can live with people that are on the aqeeda of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyya. I never called them mujassama. I don't think they are mujassama. They have problematic opinions in some issues, yes, but I can live with them. But I'll never quote them out of context. I won't go to their books and say, oh, actually, that's not what he meant. X person is talking about Tafweedh, or Y person is talking about this. I mean, I'm sorry. We can live together, but we have to respect each other. When we receive isnad, chain of transmission from our shuyukh, sometimes they specify this is for riwayah and this is for naql. So riwayah is just you have the right to repeat the words of that text that you've received from your sheikh. But naql is actually conveying the ideas in it. And I mean, we've seen in this book, Dhamm at-Ta'weel, this is an affront to the naql. This is clearly against the naql. And I want to emphasize, maybe I didn't say in the beginning, but I don't want to talk about the whole issue of Tafweedh. I'm not here to talk about the whole issue of Tafweedh. I'm here to talk about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a. What was his position? And his position is clearly not what they're alluding to and attributing him to in their books. I highly recommend or advise people to read the books of the people that we can say we're fighting over. Unfortunately, yes, we're fighting over the status of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a. Most of the people who are calling themselves Salafiyya or some name like this, they are attributing him to them. Unfortunately, we don't have many people like Sheikh Abdullah al-Ghazi who are clear what is the position of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a and them. We need more people like this. But we are talking about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a here. Like I said, I'm not opening the whole debate on a-Tafweedh. Okay, fine. You can believe what you want. I'm not going to fight you about the issue of Tafweedh. But if you want to talk about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Qudama'a, then we have to be fair and we have to have an honest conversation and we have to refer to the sources and we can't take things out of context. And if it doesn't agree with your opinion, then please don't misuse him. Even you want to insult him, call him Jahmi, like people call me Jahmi. that's between you and Allah. But let's just be fair. Let's be honest. We are Muslims. This is our obligation before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's conclude here. This has really gone on long enough. Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path. Give us the correct knowledge. And make us people who are measured and fair. Oh Allah, there's no guidance except for you and through your Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh Allah, we ask you to excuse the errors of the ignorant and their mistakes and excuse them. Oh Allah, we ask you to forgive those who make sincere mistakes and excuse them. Oh Allah, we ask you to forgive those who make sincere mistakes and excuse them. Oh Allah, guide all of the Muslims and people to the aqeeda of the Selef. Guide us all to the aqeeda of the Selef, Ya Rabbi. Guide us all to the aqeeda of the Selef. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.